The resemblance is uncanny, right? What's happening, guys? My name's Nicholas Renault, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at how you can use serverless functions. And specifically, we're going to be taking a look at how you can use serverless functions with planning analytics. Let's take a look in greater detail as to what we're going to be going through. So in this video, we're going to be covering a bunch of stuff, but specifically we're going to be focusing on how to create virtual environments with Python. We're then going to take a look at how you can write a serverless function to push data into planning analytics. And then last but not least, we're actually going to use this as a webhook and deploy it using IBM Cloud functions. So in terms of how we're going to be doing it, we're going to be using a Python function to load data into our planning analytics cube. But really this could be a database, or it could be a CSV, it could be a text file, it could be really any other external repository. When we actually go and deploy that function, we're going to be using IBM Cloud functions to deploy this as a serverless webhook. And the reason why this is so useful is because later on, we're going to be able to integrate with Watson Assistant to load information into that source using natural language processing. Ready to get to it? Let's do it. What's happening, guys? So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at serverless functions. And specifically, we're going to be setting up a serverless function that allows us to send commentary to our planning analytics cube. So if you haven't worked with planning analytics before, basically it's a super sophisticated modeling tool that's used all around the world for a whole bunch of stuff, including budgeting, forecasting, and all that good stuff. Now, in terms of how we're going to get started with this, we're going to have to set up a Python virtual environment first up. Then we're going to write some code, we're going to run it, and then deploy it on IBM Cloud. Now, the first thing that we need to do is set up our virtual environment. Now, I'm already inside of this folder here within my terminal, so you can see I'm inside of the folder called PA Serverless. Now, what I need to do in order to create a virtual environment is just use the virtual env command. Now, if you haven't worked with virtual environments before, basically it's taking a copy of your Python environment and encapsulating it all in its own little package. So let's go on ahead and set one up. Now, in order to do this, as I said, we're going to use the virtual env command. So what I've typed in is virtual env and then virtual env again. So the first virtual env is the actual command. The second virtual env is actually what we're going to be calling our virtual environment. So if we run that, you can see that we've now created a virtual environment inside of our folder, and then we can activate this using the source activate command. So we can type in source virtual env/bin/activate. And you can see that we've now activated our virtual environment over here. Now that we've set up our virtual environment, we can sort of work with this as we would any other Python environment. Now, in order to build our serverless function, we're going to need TM1 Pi. So this is going to allow us to work with our planning analytics server. So we can install that just using the regular pip install command. So let's do that. Okay, so what I've typed in is pip install TM1 Pi. This is going to allow us to install TM1 Pi inside of our virtual environment. So let's go on ahead and run that. Perfect, so that's all done, so that's now installed. Now what we're going to do is open it up inside of our favorite coding environment. So in this case, I'm going to be using VS Code. And we're going to start writing our Python script. Now, the core purpose of this Python script is to load commentary into our planning analytics cube. So eventually, we're going to be able to hook this up to Watson Assistant in a future video to be able to send commentary through using natural language processing. So we're largely focused on capturing our commentary as well as where we want our commentary to be within our planning analytics cube in order to send that through. Now, to start off with, we're just going to create a Python script, and this is going to be where we encapsulate all of our code. So let's go on ahead and create a new Python file, and we're just going to call it main.py. Now, inside of here, we're going to be doing a bunch of stuff. So let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. And we've got a bit of a to-do list. So first thing, we need to import our dependencies. Then we're going to be writing up a main function, and this is going to be what our serverless function calls. Then we're going to grab our TM1 credentials, create a cell set, write that to the cube, and then return our result. And then right at the end, we're basically going to call our function as well. So first up, let's go on ahead and import our dependencies. And that's our core dependency. So really all we're going to need is TM1 Pi and specifically the TM1 service. Now what we can go ahead and do is create our main function. So this is going to be the main function that gets called whenever we run our serverless function on IBM Cloud. So let's do that. So in order to create a function, we use the def statement. We then pass through what we want our function name to be. So in this case, we're calling it main. And then if we want to pass through any parameters or any keyword arguments, then we're basically passing them through here. Now what we want to do is actually write all the code that needs to be within our function. So in this case, all of this stuff is going to be encapsulated within our function. So first up, we're going to grab our credentials, then get our cell set, write to the cube, then return our result. So our credential details, as well as the details for the cube that we want to push through to, are going to be stored within our parameters. Now what we can do is we can access anything from our parameters using params and then basically typing in the keyword. So it might be username, might be password, so on and so forth. So for example, it might look like that. Now, but what we want to do is actually put this inside of a Python dictionary so that we can easily pass it through to TM1 Py. So let's go on ahead and set up our credentials, and then we're going to start building our cell set. So that's our credentials dictionary setup. So what we've basically gone and done is created a new Python dictionary called creds, and then we've passed through a bunch of keys. So specifically, we've got our user, we've got our password, our port, whether or not we want SSL enabled or not, as well as our server address. And we're basically going to be passing through these through as keyword arguments inside of our parameters. So we're grabbing out of that our PA user, so that's going to be our user, PA password, which is going to be our password, PA port, which is going to be our port, and PA address, which is going to be our server address. We're going to do a similar thing for our cell set, so let's go on ahead and do that. Okay, so that's our cell set setup. Now what we've actually gone and done there is, again, we've created a dictionary, and then we've specified first our key. So our key basically represents the intersection where we want to push our data to inside of Planning Analytics. So in this case, we've specified, and this, keep in mind, this is in the same order of the dimensions within inside your cube. So in this case, we've got month, version, currency, cost center, account, project, source, and measure, and then the last value that we're passing through is we're setting the value for that key to the value that we want to pass through. So this is going to be effectively the commentary that we send through to Planning Analytics. All right, so with that all said and done, then what we can do is actually write to the cube. So this is going to be using a sort of standard TM1 Py line. Basically, we're going to use the with statement, we're going to pass through our credentials, and then we're going to push our cell set into our TM1 cube. Perfect, so that's done. Now, if we take a look at that line of code there, so what we're basically doing is we're using the with statement to connect to our TM1 service, and then we're using tm1.cubes.cells.write values to actually go and write our cell set to our cube. The parameters that we pass through to our write values function are first up our cube. So in this case, we're specifying general ledger because we're going to be hitting our general ledger cube. Then we're passing through our cell set. So this is all the data that we've collected up here. And then we're also passing through our dimensions. Now this is optional, but if you've got sandboxes enabled as a dimension within your cube, you tend to have to pass through this parameter. So this parameter basically specifies the dimensions that you're passing through and in what order within your cell set. So in this case, we're going in order. So we're passing through our time, month, our version, currency, cost center, account, project, general ledger source, and general ledger measure. And if we step back through to our TM1 cube, you can see that that's going to be the same order that our dimensions are in. So you can see we've got our month, our version, currency, cost center, account, project, source, and measure. Alrighty, so that's our write done. Now what we want to do is return a result to our user. So if we're successful, then we basically want to return a yes, that was written successfully to our cube. Perfect, so that's us returning our results. So first up, we're going to print the data's loaded, and then last but not least, we're going to return our headers. So we need to pass through some headers whenever we're returning something. So in this case, we're sending through JSON, and then we're also specifying the body. So our body is going to include our message, and it's basically going to say commentary loaded. Now what we can do is actually set up our call. So in this case, we're basically going to be running this entire file. So it's going to detect whether or not we're running the file, and then it's actually going to go ahead and call our service and push through some commentary. So let's set this up. Alrighty, and that's all of our code done. So basically what we've said is if we're running this file, then basically we're going to set up our default parameters. So these are just defaults in this case, but when we actually go and deploy this as a cloud function, we're going to be able to pass through our own parameters. So what we're doing is we're passing through our PA user, PA password, PA port, and PA address, which are going to help us populate our credentials up there. And then what we're also passing through is the month, version, currency, cost center, account, project, general ledger source, general ledger measure, and our value as well. So these are basically going to help us populate our cell set that we've got here, and then we're calling our function. So this is basically going to go ahead and call this main function here, and ideally, all things holding equal, this should push through and send some comments to our PA cube. So let's open up a terminal here, and then what we can actually go and do is actually go and run this function. So in order to do that, we just need to run Python __main__.py. And you can see that our data looks like it's loaded. So let's go on ahead and check it out. And you can see that we've actually gone and loaded a test comment. So right now, this is obviously running on our local machine. Actually, let's test that out a little bit more. So let's go and try something else. Let's say this is a new test comment or just something random. Hotline bling. And then let's run it again. We refresh. You can see that we're now refreshing our commentary. So the power of this is that we can use these functions, and once they're deployed, we can hit them from anywhere with a single API request. So now, if we wanted to, we can actually go and deploy this as a function on IBM Cloud. So if we step on over to cloud.ibm.com/functions, you can see this is basically where we can deploy serverless functions, which allow us to go and hit this from just about anywhere. And eventually when we go and use our deployed function with Watson Assistant, this is going to be the webhook that we're hitting. So let's go on ahead and actually deploy this as a serverless function now. So it's actually relatively easy. All we need to do is basically log into IBM Cloud, or well, first I'm going to zip up everything that we've got within this folder here. Let's step back. My bad, we minimized that. So in order to do this, all we need to do is zip up everything that we've got here. We're then going to be able to log into IBM Cloud through the CLI and then push this function up to there. So we've now got a serverless function deployed. So let's go on ahead, and first up, we're going to zip up everything that we've got within that folder. So let's do that. So in order to zip, we're basically using the zip function. We're passing through R, and then we're specifying the name of our folder. So this is going to be called paserverless.zip once we've zipped it up. And we want to include our virtual env folder, which is that up there, as well as our main.py file. And you can see we've now zipped it up into paserverless.zip. Then what we need to do is log into the IBM Cloud console. So let's go and log in. So we can do that using, let's just clear this to make it a little bit cleaner. So we can do that using IBM Cloud, log in. I'm going to be using SSO, but in this case, when you log in, you'll be prompted to pass through your username and password. So I'm just going to type in SSO because I have to. And once you're authenticated, you just need to select your account. So I've got a couple of accounts showing, but you'll probably only have a single account. So that will allow you to specify which account you want to go and deploy this in. and we don't want to update, then what we need to do is make sure we're targeting the US South region. So this is going to allow us to bundle up all of our stuff and push it up as a cloud function. So let's go on ahead and point to the right region. So in order to change our region, we just need to type in IBM Cloud target -R US South. And that's our region specified. And then what we want to do is target Cloud Foundry. So Cloud Foundry makes it easy to deploy these functions, and it's basically going to allow us to deploy this a whole lot easier. So in order to target Cloud Foundry, we just need to type in IBM Cloud target --CF. So you can see we've typed in IBM Cloud target --CF. So that's Cloud Foundry. And that's now done. Now the last thing that we need to do is we basically just need to go on ahead and deploy our cloud function. So let's go on ahead and deploy it. Okay, so that's our cloud function down there. So let's just zoom in a little bit. So what we've basically done is we're in IBM Cloud. So that's going to allow us to use our IBM Cloud CLI. Then we've specified that we want to create an action. So we've basically specified function, action, create. Then we've specified what we want our function to be called on IBM Cloud, as well as where all of our stuff is located. So in this case, it's located in paserverless.zip. We've specified what type of function we want to deploy. So in this case, it's Python 3.7. And we've also specified where our main function is. So in this case, our main function is called main, as we saw within our file. So you can see it's right up here. And then all we need to do is hit enter. And this is going to create our serverless function inside of IBM Cloud. So let's let that deploy. And you can see we've successfully created our serverless function. It said, okay, created action PA serverless. So now if we go back to IBM Cloud Functions, we should be able to see this deployed. So if we select actions, you can see that we've got one called PA serverless. Yes, deployed. All right, so now that our function's deployed, there's a couple of key things that we need to do before we can use it. So first up, we just need to go to parameters and add in our parameters. So these are going to be our environment variables, or effectively our server variables. So in here, we can store our Planning Analytics username, password, server, and port, and so on. So let's go on ahead and specify those. All right, so we've got 4 credentials, and these are effectively our user, our password, our port, and our address. Now, if we cast our mind back to our code, these are effectively helping us populate our credentials here. So let's fill these in. So the first 2 parameters that we're passing through are just our regular Planning Analytics username and password. Then our port is going to be our HTTP port. So in this case, I got lucky. I got 12345. And then our server name is effectively going to be our server address. So in this case, we can just copy this and paste that in here and remove the HTTP. And there we go. So that's our parameters set up. Now, the next thing that we can do is actually invoke this code. Now, in order to send through our cube and our values, we can basically invoke this with some parameters. So in order to send this through, we just need to have a JSON object. So I've got a JSON object here. And in this case, we've got our month, our version, our currency, cost center, account, so on. Now, if we wanted to actually go and send this through, all we need to do is hit apply. And then we can hit invoke, and that will run our function. And there you go. So we've successfully sent through data to our Planning Analytics cube. And you can see that we've written out data loaded. So if we go back and hit refresh, you can see that our commentary is now coming through. Now, if we wanted to, we can change our comment. So in this case, we're sending it to FY 2019, budget, local, all cost centers, all accounts. But we could say our budget will not catch up, likely to be a saving, and we can hit apply. And then invoke it again. And again, this is going to go through the same process, use our function and send it through. So you can see it ran pretty fast that time. And you can see that our commentary is now coming through to our cube. So this is basically a precursor to us setting this up with Watson Assistant. Eventually, we're going to be able to call this function from Watson Assistant and pass through our commentary using natural language processing. So we covered a bunch in this video. Specifically, we set up our virtual environment. We wrote all of our Python code to send our commentary to our Planning Analytics cube. We then deployed our function using IBM Cloud Foundry and our serverless functions. And then last but not least, we actually went and tested it out and we invoked our serverless function. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and tick that bell so you get notified of when I release future videos. And let me know what you're going to be using serverless functions for. Thanks again for tuning in. Peace.